This is a Doner Kebab, Berlin's most popular street food, and in my opinion, one of the greatest sandwiches I've ever eaten. Each bite is almost a spiritual experience that gets better and better. This is an experience I had to try to recreate at home, but instead of me just getting research from books and online like I normally do, you are going to come with me on a journey to Berlin to learn firsthand about the intricacies of this triangular meat pocket. In today's video, we'll visit 3 different styles of Döner shops in Berlin as we break down the 4 core components that make up the Berliner style Döner and consider how best to make each component accessible to home kitchens around the world. For example, I'm not going to suggest that you actually get a spit to make this at home, but we will still be able to get those super fine meat shavings. Lastly, I of course have to do a final taste test to see how close the homemade version gets to that delightful day of downing Döner. Also, a big thank you to Geico for sponsoring today's episode, where 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on your car insurance. So check out the link below. We'll talk a bit more about Geico later, but now let's break down what makes the Doner Kebab so great. Let's start with a little Döner 101 because you may be thinking, this doesn't really look like German food, and it's not, but it also kind of is. And as Berlin Food Stories notes, the Döner is an integral part of Berlin's food DNA, and it's something you have to eat when coming to Berlin. Luckily, I now have a Döner guy who can break it down for us. This is my friend Andong, who has grown up and lived in Berlin his entire life, including making his own guide to Döner, and for me to learn any recipe, I love breaking foods down into their core components. So we're in the beautiful city of Berlin. I've got my friend Andong. Say hi.
Hello.
So first, can you tell me what are the basic components of this sandwich?
Okay, so let's start with the bread. The bread is super soft and pillowy, and it has this classic triangular shape. Then there's meat, of course, which always comes from this vertical rotating spit. Then there are some fresh veggies. Every place does it a little bit differently. And then, very famously, there are 3 classic sauces to go with it: garlic, spicy, and herbal sauce.
So the classic Berliner style Döner has 4 components: the bread, the sauces, the shaved meat, and the Döner salad. And while all Döner have these components, even in Berlin, as we'll see, every place is gonna do it a little different. But before we really start eating, I wanted to know, what are the origins of this sandwich? From what I know, this is not traditional German food, so exactly where did this originate, and then how has it become so popular in Berlin?
Yeah, it's definitely the #1 street food in Germany, but its roots are somewhere else, and that is Turkey. You might have seen those vertical spits like in footage of the Middle East or Turkey. However, the döners that you find in Germany are nothing like those that you find over there, because there are 2 styles that are most common here, and both of them have been invented by Turkish migrants right here in Berlin to cater to the tastes of locals.
So you've got 3 spots for us to check out, 2 different categories. I'm excited. Let's go eat.
Let's go.
The 3 locations Andong picked out for us are under the 2 Döner styles. These are 1, the traditional, typically made with shaved beef or veal, and then 2, the modern, which is quite different. So our first location falls under the traditional, and it's a more of a premium sit-down location with whole muscle cuts. And the second, still traditional, but made with the emulsified meat on the spit, kind of a grab-and-go everyday Döner. And what we're gonna do is compare and contrast how each place approaches the 4 core components, which, while all still delicious, are very, very different. So we'll break down the components in order of how the Döner is going to be assembled. So let's start with the foundation of every great sandwich, the bread. The bread used for Doner Kebab is a Turkish flatbread called pide, and most commonly this enriched bread dough is shaped into a circle, baked, and then cut into quarters to create that signature triangle shape of the Döner. These triangle pockets of bread are then stuffed with the sauces, shaved meat, and fresh veggies, and that pide is toasted and grilled before being filled to give it a slightly crisp crust that gives it that perfect touch of textural contrast.
Check out the grill marks.
Oh yeah. Very good grill marks on this one too. Now, to really understand the texture of this bread, we purchased a full circle of it from a Turkish grocer in Berlin that I could get my hands on, and it really surprised me with 2 unique qualities. So it's like soft but elastic too, which is like what you get that great chew from, So it'll be interesting to kind of recreate this for myself and kind of find out exactly how they do this, because it's a super interesting bread texture, and yeah, I can't wait to see what I come up with. So the first two traditional doner shop use that classic triangular shape, but you'll also see pide formed into individual buns, as we have with the Döner Kebab at the last location, and this one is a little bit heavier.
This particular shop serves them in a round bun, which is different than the triangular bun, but I'm okay with both.
So how hard is it to make this bread at home? Well, it's fairly easy and insanely delicious. To start, set a bowl over a scale and add 200 grams of warm milk, 10 grams of yeast, 120 grams of all-purpose flour, a little sugar, and mix this up so it's pretty soupy. I tried 3 or 4 recipes, and this one I'm showing you is from my friend Obi over on the Middle East channel, and he has a full breakdown. We're kind of just doing the Cliff Notes version here. Let this mixture rest for 30 minutes, and then go ahead and add 245 grams of water, 40 grams of olive oil, 8 grams of salt, and finally 415 grams of all-purpose flour before mixing all that together. Once a wet, shaggy dough is formed and no dry flour remains, just fold the dough onto itself and let rest for 30 minutes. Now, this is optional, but I did perform one set of stretch and folds before letting rest for 30 minutes and just work that dough into the shape of a ball. Next, grease a pan sheet or circular pizza pan and pop that ball into the center and work it out into a large circle, and if it is springing back too much, just let this rest for another 15 minutes. Once shaped, rub some egg wash over the dough and use your fingers to make some light indentations, and then finally sprinkle some nigella and sesame seeds before baking, letting that cool and slicing it into triangles. Now, this bread doesn't quite have the same airiness of the Turkish grocer. That being said, it's still insanely delicious and addictive in its own right. Andong and I agree, there's got to be something they're doing with like the commercial processing or some ingredient that they're adding to give it that weird, super light cloud-like texture. But this is very, very delicious and is perfect for our doner. But now that we have the foundation, we can talk about the next item, and that is the signature sauces. The sauces are one of the key differentiators of the German Döner compared to the ones in Turkey that are normally eaten without sauces. And there are 3 main ones you'll typically see on a Döner assembly line in Berlin.
For the sauces, there are 3 classic ones: garlic, herb, and spicy sauce. And for some reason, it's sort of tradition. It's like an unspoken rule that you only choose 2 at a time. Usually it's like garlic and spicy or herb and spicy, and sometimes it's herb and garlic.
Since we hit 3 different spots, we tried 3 different combos. Location 1, the traditional, we went with that herb and garlic. The second spot, we went spicy only. And then finally, location 3, we went with the herb sauce and the spicy sauce. So exactly which one is the best? Well, you'll have to try for yourself, but for me, I was definitely partial to the herb and spicy combination. And I like the balance. We went with the herb sauce and the spicy sauce, which I think those are my 2 sauces of choice. So how close can we get to replicating these at home? Well, Andong's herb sauce is honestly spot on, and then I took a stab at a spicy sauce, and these are honestly just worth making in bulk and keeping in your fridge to throw on everything. To make the herb sauce, set a container over a scale and add 225 grams of mayonnaise, 115 grams of plain yogurt, 5 grams of salt, a couple grams of MSG, optional, some agave syrup, dried dill, dried mint, dried oregano, garlic powder, and onion powder. Then all you have to do is mix that up and ideally let it sit for a couple of hours in the fridge so those flavors get to know each other. I would say for me, the herb sauce is definitely a non-negotiable, but for the spicy sauce, you don't necessarily have to make one. You could buy one of your favorite spicy sauces, or I took a stab at making one with some common ingredients I have in the fridge. In general, the spicy sauce is kind of a mix of sweet and sour with the spiciness hitting you at the end. Mine is not traditional, but I decided to make it with some ingredients most of us can probably find. So set a bowl over a scale and add 50 grams of ketchup, 50 grams of sambal or chili garlic paste, and lastly 50 grams of harissa before mixing that up. And these sauces are spread on the pide bread before being stuffed with our next component, the shaved meat. And this shaved meat is where I saw the biggest differences between the Döner shops. While all Doner kebabs in Berlin are going to be made with meat that is crisped and shaved off from a massive pit, the actual meat on that spit varies quite a bit, and there are two main categories, the traditional and the modern. The traditional doner is going to be made from beef, and typically this is veal, but it kind of has two subcategories. One, your layered whole muscle cut spits, and then two, your emulsified meat. The spit from location number 1 was an example of that layered whole muscle veal cuts, and these are layered onto the spit to start the day, and then spun around to cook and crisped up before being shaved off and shoved into the triangular bread pocket. Location number 2 is an example of the emulsified meat. This is also the more common kind of everyday kebab, maybe a little bit cheaper, not quite as high quality, but still very delicious. This spit was actually a blend of 50% veal and 45% beef, and as you can see, it doesn't have those big layers of the whole muscle cuts. This emulsified meat is a little bit more heavily seasoned and browns more evenly, but it can be prone to being a touch more dry. The meat from location number 1 was hands down my favorite of the two traditional spots, definitely more juicy and satisfying.
The meat has little charred edges from the spit, which is just like incredible.
So you may be wondering, what's on that spit for the modern kebab? This is called the gamuse or veggie kebab, and as Andog will tell us, it's a little bit of a misnomer, and we can also thank an outbreak of mad cow disease for this innovation.
So this is what we call a Gemüse Kebab, which technically translates to veggie kebab, which is a little bit misleading because this is a chicken kebab with a little bit of fried veggies inside. And that is a crucial difference. Overall, this is a slightly more modern, street foodie type of kebab, and it has an interesting story. Sometime maybe 20, 30 years ago or something, there was a big outbreak of mad cow disease in Europe. And obviously, people were very hesitant to eat beef or veal. So the doner industry took a big hit. But they improvised and they started making chicken kebab spits. Very unusual back in the day, but it was a solution to a very complicated problem. What happened is this spawned a whole new category of Doner Kebab, which is this, Gemüse Kebab or chicken kebab. And because it is a more modern invention, sort of just 20, 30 years old, it feels more trendy, more modern, and slightly more refined when it comes to the way they make it. So they will crumble a little bit of like feta style cheese on top. They will add a spritz of lemon, and of course they have these like deep fried veggies, usually I believe carrots, potatoes and eggplants, and they also season those with either soy sauce or Maggi sauce or something like that. And I think those veggies, that is the biggest difference between a classic one and this one, other than of course the meat being chicken versus veal. But yeah, those fried veggies are the biggest difference.
So whichever meat you end up choosing, the key is getting those super thin slices of meat that they shave off with a knife, or today there are even special razor-like tools. And this desired outcome from the textural component is the problem that we have to solve at home. The beauty of the massive spit is that the meat is spun into the flame where it's crisped and then shaved off just as it's done. And this gives us super thin shavings of meat and then also crisp brown bits on every piece of meat that is shaved off. Now you could get one of those at-home spits to do this, but you'll likely run into a couple of issues. First, home spits are way smaller and not as powerful, so you kind of have to completely cook the chicken through, meaning only the outside layer is going to be browned, or then you have to restart the machine and try to cook it again, which will dry out the meat. Also, because of the smaller size, you can't get those super thin shavings, so it kind of defeats the whole point. So at home, how are we going to get those super thin shavings and the crispy brown bits on every piece of meat? Well, I'm going to show you what I think is the most accessible option, and all you need is the freezer and a sharp knife. And I'll say straight up, this meat and the flavor on it got way closer than I thought it would. I decided to use chicken for mine, but you could use ground beef or veal cuts, just depends on what you want to use. So to start, set boneless, skinless chicken thighs on a baking sheet and sprinkle salt evenly over each of them. Now, these actually started as bone-in, skin-on chicken thighs that I removed and rendered out the fat from the skin. This is optional, but the rendered chicken fat is amazing to cook these in. After salting, it's time for the doner seasoning. So each place is going to do it a bit differently with their spices, but this mix I made is pretty solid, and I'll just leave the ingredients on screen. Now you could cook these chicken thighs right away and just slice them thin as you can after cooking, and it's going to be good. But in order to get those razor thin slices that are basically translucent, we need to toss the whole tray into the freezer for at least 2 hours or overnight. Then, once frozen, just pull them out, and using a sharp knife, slice or chip off as fine of pieces as you can. And depending on how sharp your knife is and how patient you are with your cuts, you'll get those super razor thin, translucent shreds of chicken. Now, to be honest, this kind of takes a while if you are trying to get super thin slices, so I would suggest throwing on your favorite show while doing this, and just go slow. If your knife is having trouble slicing, you can always let that chicken thaw for about 10 to 15 minutes to help it soften a bit. Now, this knife fork is a little bit annoying, but it is 1000% worth it, because then you can just freeze this and keep it in a bag, and then you literally have chicken doner meat or whatever meat you decide to use to whip up at a moment's notice. To cook the meat, just add some oil to the pan, and again, this is actually that rendered chicken fat, and put it on ripping high heat. Once hot, toss on the shaved chicken, and I recommend doing one thin layer and then really blasting it on one side to get those brown and crispy bits on only one side, and there will be enough residual heat to cook it through. And this kind of simulates the one side of the brown texture we get from the spit. And this chicken meat has such a unique texture. It's absolutely bursting with flavor, and I could eat this alone by the fistful. The fresh components of the Döner salad are also not to be overlooked, as it is a critical component of differentiation. Those Turkish-German migrants started to add tomatoes, cucumbers, and red cabbage to the Döner sandwich, marketing it as a healthier fast food alternative to things like sausages and burgers. Now, a Doner Kebab is still made with a bunch of meat and bread, so I don't know if adding veggies exactly makes it health food, but it does provide a bunch of color and textural contrast, and it definitely doesn't sit as heavy like a lot of other fast foods do. So how does the Döner salad differ across locations? Well, spot number one kept it minimalist with just white onion, lettuce, cucumber, and tomato. The second spot had those same items, but with the addition of some very thinly sliced red cabbage, very, very common. And then location 3 used thinly sliced red onion, romaine lettuce, and cucumber and tomato mixed together, a little feta, and a squirt of lemon juice as well, which I found to be a really nice touch. So at home, I'll let you decide which veg to use, but I definitely like the color that we get from the thinly sliced red cabbage with some salt and a spritz of lemon, and then I added that to mine along with the classic chopped up onion, tomato, and cucumber. With that, we have covered all of the components, so now it is time to assemble and do the final taste test and see how this thing stacks up. Before we taste test, thank you again to Geico for sponsoring today's episode. I'm partnering with Geico this year to explore meals that save you both time and money in the kitchen and are just flat out delicious. So check out the link below to see all the ways that you could switch and save with Geico. But now, let's see if my homemade version stacks up to those amazing experiences I tasted in Germany. All right, 2 very important final touches. First, a tiny sprinkle of salt on the vegetables, which you will notice they did at that last location. Nice touch. And then, of course, a Doner Kebab is not really a Doner Kebab until it is housed in its paper. And thank you to Andong for giving me some of these. He's traveled with me all over Europe, so let's give it its final crowning. And there we have our final sandwich. It's been a long time coming. Let's see how close this gets to recreating that experience. Sorry, I just needed a minute to enjoy that. That, my friends, that takes me back. The flavors are really, really spot on. Andong's herb sauce recipe, he's developed it, is so spot on. Then I love that hit from the spiciness, can't be beat. The fresh components, and then this meat, like, you guys have got to try this method for meat. It is incredible. It's super browned on the edges, super thin little shavings of chicken. It's just such a great way to do chicken. Maybe I'll do a whole other video just like on this method of how you could use this for like meal prep or something. The bread has a great chew, so flavorful. Actually more flavorful than that Turkish grocer bread we got. Not quite as light. So that's like the one area from like a texture perspective in the bread. I feel like Maybe if I do some more testing, I can get the bread even lighter than it is, but the flavor of the bread, I think way better. It still has that really nice chew, and just an absolutely phenomenal sandwich that I hope all of you guys tried, and hopefully you have enjoyed the video, kind of this journey to making the Doner Kebab and a little bit of travel in aspects. So let me know if you guys enjoyed the video. I definitely want to do more of this type of content in the future. This one recipe for this will of course be on the website, but that's gonna wrap it up for me in this one. I will catch you all in the next one. Peace, y'all.
I'm always surprised by like where Ethan takes his first bite. Like yesterday when we were tasting Dickmann's, like you just went like sideways, you ate it like a burger. So, and then you started eating the döner from the side.
I didn't know where to tackle it too. I don't know proper döner etiquette yet.
I don't know, but it feels like self-explanatory that you start with the tip. I don't know about you, Ethan. Like you do you.
I felt like I needed to start from the hinge.
Okay.